Hello, everyone. This is Mike from Dimensional Walking. And today we're going to do a two parter. And I'm going to do a two parter. This will be part one, of course. And it's going to be called Aliens, Eisenhower, and the Military Industrial Complex. Okay? So the reason I want to do this is it's kind of like a triple deal here because, I've always been interested in aliens. I've been kind of studying them and doing alien abduction witness interviews for well over 50 some years. And, I always thought Eisenhower is one of the most interesting and probably one of the best presidents we ever had here. And the military industrial complex. I've worked with several companies that are a part of the military industrial complex. Primarily is a logistics in the logistics area, although I've done some other things which unfortunately I can't tell you at all. But anyways, so I'm combining all three of these together, and I want to talk about Eisenhower's encounter meetings, I guess we'll call them, with aliens. These meetings have been kind of what would I say? Some people would consider more like rumors and conspiracy stuff. I personally believe they did happen. At least one of them for sure. There's been also rumors that there was more than one, two or three, in the past. Now, there's been a couple of different locations that they say these meetings have taken place. One of the locations, of course, was at Edwards Air Force Base in California, very close to Palm Springs. And the reason I think one of the reasons they're saying this is that Eisenhower had his winter retreat at Palm Springs. And I think there was some relationship there. I think Air Force One would take off from Palm Springs quite a bit. There was also rumor that Eisenhower saw several aliens there, dead aliens there, possibly from Roswell, that were brought there for him to inspect. Possibly, I'm not for sure. But the story I want to kind of tell you is a story that came from somebody that we know, that Rainbow and I know. It's Clark McClellan, who is a very controversial figure. But the reason I wanna use his story, the way he understands it, is because Rainbow and I met Clark in Florida and did a pretty extensive interview with him about many different things. Okay, Clark supposedly said that he is the SCO was the SCO of the U.S. Space Shuttle Fleet between 1958 and 1992. Now, I don't know that for sure. I mean, he showed us a lot of things that would indicate that he probably was did something at NASA during that time frame. But he seemed to be a pretty sincere guy. What checking I could do on him seemed to pan out. So I felt pretty good about it. So I'm going to go with his kind of story of it. And like I said, there's been other people. In fact, even his story, I did talk to somebody else completely independent of him that gave a similar story that this happened at the Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico, this meeting. So here we go. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to look down and do a little bit of kind of reading through his account of what he felt happened. But I don't believe, and again, it doesn't really say, that he actually was there at the Air Force Base to witness it. I don't think he was. I think he had connections. He had a lot of connections. And I think this is a story that one of his connections that he felt comfortable with told him, and he relayed it to people. Okay? And he did mention it to Rainbow and I, but there was a lot of stuff when we went to do the interview that was included in the interview. And that was kind of a passing moment because there was so much compact in about 3 hours of time. We met in a restaurant in his hometown in I think it's Central Florida is what it was. I'm not going to mention a town at all. I believe he's still alive. I haven't communicated with him for several years now, but we did for probably 2 years after this particular meeting we had with him. So, anyways, on or about 1955, Eisenhower was approaching Holloman Air Force Base. Now, Holloman Air Force Base is in the eastern part of New Mexico. As you know, Rainbow and I lived in New Mexico for quite a few years. Never been to Holloman. It's quite a ride from Albuquerque is where we lived. But anyways, it's on the eastern fringes, and it's still an active base now. It's been active for a long time, and they used to store their heavy bombers that were used during the Korean War. And I think most of those bombers are all been decommissioned, but they do have other stealth bombers and things that also are still there as of today, as far as I understand. So anyways, so here comes this Lockheed Constellation. It's an old Lockheed plane. Of course, we're talking about 1955 now. And normally it would carry probably 125 passengers. On this particular day, it really had probably 25 people, including the president, on it. And so it started approaching the airfield, and the pilot, who was named Bob Draper, started reversing engines and slowed the plane down. And now we're on the runway already. And there'll be a little bit more I'm going to tell you about. But they were on the runway, and they taxied down the runway, and they stopped. And all engines were shut down. Now they never went to like the terminal, and everybody else knew that the president was coming. So all the other people on the base that could have a vantage point were out looking at their windows, and the tower people were looking at the plane, and it just stopped there. And nobody really particularly knew why it just stopped where it stopped. It was kind of at the far end of the field. It was close to a few hangars, I think, but there it just stopped. It seemed quite eerie. It seemed that it was just sitting out there about a half a mile away, alone and very quiet there, nothing really happening. There was the typical red carpets, any of the parades that, normally when a president lands at a military air base, there's kind of some pomp and circumstance that goes on around the president, of course. But eventually the people on the base that were looking out the window and see if they could get a glimpse of Eisenhower just, pretty much went back to what they were doing previously. And of course, then they were starting to question, was Ike really on the plane? What's kind of going on, etc. And then I guess the commander of the base told everybody, just go on to your normal business, just keep on, because I really think the commander, the base commander, he didn't know what was going on precisely, or he wasn't letting on to what was going on. So anyways, I guess there was a communication was heard from the plane at 8:10, and they requested landing instructions. Of course, this is the plane going to the landing. They were asking for landing instructions, and where, and the wind direction, all the normal stuff you do. And again, I mentioned to you, it moved, the plane landed and went to pretty much the farthest end of the field where a few hangars were and some workshops. So anyways, so it stayed there for probably about 10 minutes or so, okay? And then there was an instruction given to everybody to shut off their radars. The tower's radar, I believe it was, and the radar. They have small radars in some of these little vehicles, and they were to turn those off too. And for some reason they wanted to do this because they didn't want any extra distractions. Okay, so something was up. There's no doubt something was up, and the other visual, the patrols, they all kind of stayed away from the plane. They didn't get close to the plane. They were instructed to stay back and aware. Then all of a sudden the phone in the tower rang, and apparently they noticed that there was some objects, unidentified objects, coming in towards the base, and I think there was 2 of them that they saw. And they, what was interesting about it is that there was 2 coming, and there was another one right behind it. And what was really that stunned them, that stunned the people in the tower that were watching with binoculars, and the people on the ground with, there was no tail, no wings, and no motors, is what they said. They were round objects approaching the president's plane, which was still sitting alone in the far end of the field. And so something now, a lot of the people were starting to get the idea that something big was up. They stopped, the 2 objects stopped about 300 feet over Air Force One. And one descended to the far side of the plane and gently touched down about 200 feet in front of the plane. And the other still hovered briefly, around the plane itself. The disc had and again I'm going to just kind of read it, the disc had a good advantage point of everything that might come towards the president's plane and the other disc that's on the ground. So one is on the ground, one is still above, kind of watching over everything. It was that with some disbelief that 2 UFOs had actually come to Holloman Air Force Base because they had never seen it. And this was in February 1955. So I guess there was very little, at that point, there really wasn't any kind of background. And so nobody really initially thought they were UFOs from extraterrestrials. They actually were starting to think, well, maybe it's, the rumors about the Germans and Nazis having UFOs. And of course, they thought, well, maybe the Russians had developed something. So that was what was going through their head at the time. And I'm talking about the people that are in the towers and everybody else on the field except for probably the president and probably whoever was in these UFOs, right? So as soon as the UFO landed in front of Air Force One, one man, many assumed to be the president, came out to the doorway of the plane and descended the portable steps and approached the saucer, which was on the ground, and some sort of a hatch opened a few minutes before and folded down, I guess, a small ramp. The man walked up to the ramp, who they think was the president, stood briefly at the opening, shook hands with somebody, and went inside. So now we got the president possibly walking inside a UFO. Okay? Observers thought that this person, possibly the president, probably the president, walked into the UFO and was there for 45 minutes. Okay? He emerged from the craft. He walked towards Air Force One. Now this was the president came down, and then this other being or some entity. Again, people were pretty far away, so they couldn't maybe see it, but this thing was the way they described it, because it was quite a distance. It had no hat on, and only recognized the hairline, and it had a very erect military walk. That's what they could see. So they didn't say it looked like a gray alien. They didn't say it looked like a reptilian. They didn't say any of that. But they said it looked, I guess, a little unusual. It didn't look maybe like Eisenhower, who was also there close by. And that's really the end of the story there. So just so you understand, that was kind of the end of the story. So we don't really know what was talked about in the UFO. We don't know too much else about it. I mean, there's been a tremendous amount of speculation. about it. So, anyways, so that kind of ends. I just want to kind of give you the background on this meeting that took place, I believe, at Hulliman, and I believe it to be true. And so what we'll do is we'll go from there, and I want to talk about what happened in 1961 is when President Eisenhower, he went ahead and did his farewell speech. And I want to talk about in part 2 about what he said in that speech. It was a great speech, and I want to go over it, and I want you to hear what he kind of talked about the military-industrial complex. And I want to then speculate on things that I've heard over the years, maybe why he said that and how the aliens that he met could have played a role in that farewell speech. So anyways, with that said, let me get going on part 2, and we'll play part 2 after part 1, and then see what you think. And like I say, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of comments on this one. I'm hoping there is, because there's been a lot of speculation, a lot of rumors, a lot of stories covering this subject matter. So anyways, with that said, happy trails until we meet again. Please subscribe. We need your subscriptions. If you would like to send us a private email, it's dimensionalwalking@gmail.com. And please comment. Please like us if you like us. And that's it for now. We'll see you in part 2. Bye-bye.